I wanted to start off this video with a picture of my grandmother, and this is where this bread recipe came from. She grew up in a town called Marshall, and it's in a mountainous area of Arkansas that a lot of people haven't been to, but she also grew up in a very poor family with 7 brothers and sisters, and so she learned from a very young age how to stretch a dollar and make a little into a lot. So after she got married to my grandpa, they also had some hard times, but she got to use the skills that she learned as a child to help my grandpa stretch his paycheck and make cheap meals that were still delicious. And one of those things that they would make themselves is their bread. The recipe in this video isn't the recipe that they've always used, but they've used it for a very long time. This particular bread recipe came from my grandma's best friend, and her name is Janice. And she got that bread recipe from her about 17 years ago. Hey guys, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ashton Owen, and I am a math major here at ASU. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about the recipe and the things that me and my grandpa talked about while he taught me how to make the bread. So one of the things that we discussed was when he took over making the bread about 5 years ago. He saw that my grandma wasn't doing very well. She was having knee problems and problems with arthritis in her hands, so kneading the dough and things like that were becoming really difficult for her. But my grandpa did not want to give up the homemade bread. It is a sin to him to buy bread at the store, and we were raised like that, but my mom buys bread at the store, so I was used to it. But when you go to Gran and Papa's house, you know that there's never going to be any packaged bread. If we want rolls, we make rolls. If we want sandwich bread, we make sandwich bread. It's just what they do. So when I heard that my grandma couldn't make the bread anymore, I was like, oh my goodness, who's going to make the bread? But my grandpa stepped up and decided that he would take over that portion of her daily routine, and so that she could sleep in and rest. So even though we called it Gran's bread for my whole life, we had to learn to call it Papa's bread since he was the one making it. But he really has a giving spirit, and you'll notice when I show you how to make the bread that this particular recipe makes a lot of bread. You can get about 3 loaves out of it, and the first time I made it with him, I made 2 loaves, and then we made about a dozen rolls. So we had 2 different kinds, and then in this video, I made some miniature rolls, and then some normal size rolls, and then 1 loaf of bread, which is a lot of bread. Especially if, me, I'm just a college student by myself, I can't eat that much bread. So I watched my grandpa my whole life. He would make 3 loaves of bread. He would keep 1 for himself and my grandma for the week, and he would choose 2 people to give away the loaves of bread to. So I really learned that lesson from him, that it's important to take what you have, even if it's just a loaf of bread that you made, and go give it to someone. Don't keep it all for yourself, because it will ruin. And instead of cutting the recipe in a third and just making a little bit, he made plenty so that he could share with other people. So that's really why I chose this recipe, is because throughout my life, watching him make the bread and helping him make the bread, he always taught me it's important to give and share with other people. And so that's what I wanted to do with y'all today. So now I'm going to show you how to make the bread. So now that you've seen how you make the bread, I wanted to go ahead and just talk you through the rest of it because my video is getting really long. So what I did after I kneaded the dough is I put it back in the bowl and covered it with a wet rag and let that rise for 8 hours. And the recipe says it takes 8 to 12. If it's humid outside, it's going to take all 12 hours. So when I made the bread a couple days ago, it was really humid, and so it took the entire 12 hours for the bread to rise. So sometimes you will have to wait the entire time, but if you get a really good bread making day, it'll only take 8 hours or less. But unfortunately, it was not that way for me this last time. So after you've let it rise for the full amount of time, then you take it out of the bowl and you section it off however you want. If you want to make rolls, if you want to make loaves of bread, whatever you want to do, you just section those off and make sure there are no air bubbles, because if there is an air bubble, you'll get a big hole in your bread and that's not really what you want. So you need to make sure that you really get all the air bubbles out. And then you place them in a well-oiled container because that bread sticks really bad. So you have to make sure you get oil all over the container that you're baking it in. And then you preheat the oven to 325 degrees and let it bake for about 30 minutes. And that's pretty much it. It's not too tough of a recipe. It was definitely trial and error. This time was a little bit rough. So hopefully when I make it on Tuesday, it'll be a little bit easier for me and that it will turn out really well for you guys on Wednesday. So I hope you enjoyed the video. See y'all in class.